when we die, the body dies, obviously, but our mind continues. What happens to consciousness when we die? The transformation and all of that. Would you like to talk about that?
Sure, I can talk about that. See, the question is what happens to consciousness when we die?
PMR characters, consciousness.
Yeah, that almost assumes that consciousness has something to do with the body. You see, consciousness has nothing to do with the body. So when the body dies, it really doesn't affect consciousness at all, because consciousness is not a part of the body. Consciousness is not generated by the body. Consciousness is independent of the body. So the body dying has really no effect on consciousness. And to get this idea, let's talk about a virtual reality game. Let's talk about The Sims or the World of Warcraft. And let's say you have an elf playing in the World of Warcraft. What happens? Now, and well, let's go further. The analogy there is you, the person with the computer monitor and the mouse or the joystick, the keyboard that is controlling that elf. You are the consciousness. Okay, you're the consciousness. The elf is the body, your avatar. Now, if you don't give it any input, if you don't tell it what to do or which way to look or whether to walk or sit down or stand still, it doesn't do anything. It just remains however it is and stays there. It's becomes inanimate. So it only moves when your will moves it. When you touch a key or push a turn right button or something like that, then your character moves. Well, you're the consciousness. So now here's the question. What happens to you sitting at the keyboard when your elf dies? Nothing, right? Because you don't have anything to do with the elf's body, with that character. Well, it's the same way. So we say, well, what happens to consciousness when the body dies? Well, it's just like what happens to you sitting at the keyboard when your elf dies. Well, nothing happens to you at all. You're in two different reality frames, and the death of the elf is not pertinent to the death of the person at the keyboard that animates that elf, the death of the consciousness. So to begin with, even the question itself sort of comes with an assumption that somehow consciousness is attached to the body, that consciousness is a creation of the body, and that our brain produces consciousness. And now what happens when the brain dies? You see, now that's a problem we have. The brain's going to die, then the consciousness will die, and what happens? Does the consciousness resurrect itself someplace else or what? You see, it's not like that. You don't resurrect yourself, someplace else when your elf dies. You just, shake your head and say, uh-oh, monster got me, and you go regenerate your elf or go do another character or whatever it is you do in the game. It's not really an effective consciousness. So what happens when your elf dies or when your body dies is that you, as consciousness, become aware that you were the elf and you were working that, but suddenly your elf falls over and you come to the conclusion that, you're not in that reality frame anymore. It's like somebody pulls the plug on your monitor, the monitor goes off, and now you're not in that reality frame anymore. You're not playing that character anymore. That's gone. So you become aware in a different reality. Well, if you're playing World of Warcraft, and you were so engrossed in the game that all the rest of your reality was blocked out. It was just your mind and your elf. That was all was there. You didn't notice anything else going on because you were so focused on the game. And then your elf dies. Well, suddenly now you're focused back on your computer, on, the fact that you're hungry, go to the refrigerator and get a sandwich, all sorts of other things then start to enter into your mind in this reality frame where you and the keyboard and the computer are. So that's the way it is when your physical body dies here. Your consciousness becomes aware in its own reality frame. And that own reality frame is another virtual reality that that is designed or generated or what can we say is made for transitions from physical to the non-physical, from consciousness playing a body to consciousness without the body. So it's just a transition place. Pardon?
Necessary. That reality frame evolved, and it was necessary.
Yes, that reality frame evolved because it was necessary, just like our reality frame here in the the physical thing we call physical reality evolved because it was necessary, and so does this other virtual reality that helps the transition when a body dies, because the people here, unlike the player in World of Warcraft, the consciousness there with the keyboard playing the elf, it knows that it is playing the elf and that it is the elf's consciousness and that the elf is just in a virtual reality. It's aware of all that. But here we are, and we're not aware of that because there's a piece of our consciousness that's entered into this game, and it's basically, in the game. It's completely immersed in the game. So because that awareness doesn't know what's going to happen next, it's just a big question mark. When it dies, well, what now? And then, of course, once the body dies and the consciousness becomes aware in this other virtual reality, then it gets its answer to that. So it is another virtual reality that is generated just to serve that purpose. People come in to that other virtual reality after death here very confused sometimes. Now, if they do understand what's going on, they don't come in confused at all. They know exactly what's happening, and their processing in requires almost no attention whatsoever. It's very quick and efficient. However, if they come in with a lot of fear and trepidation, they're not sure what's going to happen next and so on, then they need some in-processing to help get rid of that fear. Fear's the problem. So this process is primarily designed to help people get rid of the anxiety and the fear and the stress of suddenly becoming aware in a different reality frame.
It sounds like this PMR character, the awareness in this reality frame is sort of projected into the afterlife frame.
Say that again. You're saying that the PMR... Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yes, okay. You're saying that when the PMR person gets here, he brings some of his fear and trepidation with him.
Yeah, it's like you're projecting the PMRs.
Yes, and they do. And they that comes with them, but it leaves like a dream, okay? It's a really good analogy to say that when your body dies, you as consciousness start to forget the life you just led in the same way that you begin to forget a dream. Now, if the dream was very inconsequential, you were just doing stuff, but it wasn't stuff that really you had a lot of emotional, connection to, then that dream fades very quickly. The minute you wake up, it's clear. 30 seconds later, it's fuzzy. 2 minutes later, you don't even remember that you had the dream. It goes very, very quickly. But if you have a dream that's very traumatic or something that really attaches, you attach to it very strongly, then you wake up and the dream is very strong. And then, half an hour later, you can still remember it. Maybe even a week later, you can still remember it, but eventually it kind of fades too. So it's the same way. When you come to this virtual reality after a physical death, when your consciousness wakes up, if it's very strongly attached to things, very strongly attached to fear mostly, and beliefs, fear and beliefs are the two big things that you get attached to. If it's very strongly attached to fear and belief, then it takes a while to work that off. It takes a while to let that go. And this transition helps that entity let go of that. Whereas if it comes in with a very light attitude, with very little fear and very little belief, then it dispenses with the past life very quickly and very easily. So you have all different kinds of situations, and the reality is there and will serve us all of those situations. Those that don't need it get passed right on through the processing very quickly with hardly any attention at all. They don't need it. And some come with, take a person who has a fundamental belief in religion, a fundamental belief in heaven and hell, a fundamental fear of, everlasting damnation or something like that. That's a very strong, deep level fear. It's been ingrained with them from very young and supported as they got older. Now they're going to have a harder time. They're going to have to, acclimate to things being very different than what their beliefs were. And that will be a slower process. Anyway, it's just an example. I don't want to pick on fundamental religion, but that's just one process. People come in who are very psychotic. They have a hard time adjusting well too, because they're not sure what's real and what's not. And it takes them a while just to realize that this new virtual reality they're in is their reality, that they're not just dreaming or having a fantasy, and that this reality is real and the other one's gone. It takes them maybe a while to get over that. And those that come in from traumatic events, accidents, particularly accidents that that are kind of slow, like accidents maybe in boats where you float around for weeks before you finally die, that kind of thing. They're so traumatized and focused on those events that it takes them a while longer to let that go. It's like waking up from a particularly bad nightmare. It takes a little time to get out of it. So that's what this virtual reality is all about. So what happens is the people are made to feel comfortable. If you have relatives that have passed on that you're particularly fond of, these relatives will appear to be there and greet you and tell you that everything will be just fine. They won't stay around a real long time, but that will happen. Now, are they really your relatives? No, not really. They're just the larger consciousness system playing your relative. And the larger consciousness system can do that very accurately because it has all the data. It has all the experience. It has everything that was said, that was not said, that was felt, that was experienced, that every emotion, all of that is in the database. So the larger conscious system can play that character very well. And like I say, they don't stick with you long. It's not like these reunions last for days. They're very short. They last more like 15 or 20 minutes, just enough to calm you down, and then the relatives disappear and you go on your way. So that's one of the tricks of the trade, if you will, of calming a person down when they come in. Another one is just to occupy them so that they feel, like they're busy or they're doing something or they're getting somewhere. Because if you let people just stand alone without giving them a process to work, they get very nervous and upset. They think that they've been left out or looked over or something. So you give them busy work. Tell them to go over there and wait in line in processing, or take these classes, will help you understand. And so a lot of it is just waiting around and not doing much because you're just biding time. All the time they're hanging around thinking that everything is working through. They just have to wait for the process to work. That dream of their past life, that past life is fading, going away, and all of that stuff is disappearing, and they're going to be left just with existing in this reality. Then they'll get bored and they'll want to go on. And then's when they get talked to about the next experience packet, the next lifetime. And if they are relatively well evolved, then they put a lot of input to it themselves. If they're not, then something's kind of worked out for them and they jump back in.
This reality frame after death, we already talked about why it exists, but this larger consciousness system is a digital system, and why doesn't it just, delete the negative beliefs or whatever? Why is it a dynamic experience in order to this transformation?
Well, here's the way maybe I can explain it. You don't gain anything just by duplicating what you have. You gain by learning, growing, changing what you have into something better. Okay, that's growth. Okay, so let's look at evolution, and this larger conscious system is evolving. So let's say evolution started with the single cell, worked itself all the way up to something reasonably complex like a fish or a frog. And it said, wow, that's pretty good. Let's just duplicate that. So it fills the whole earth with, 5 billion frogs, and that's it, we're done. You see, well, what has it done? One frog was enough. Well, I shouldn't say one frog, 2 frogs were enough. A few frogs were enough. A billion more frogs doesn't make it better, doesn't solve any problems, because that's just duplication. There's no entropy reduction in it. It's the same entropy level, whether there's, 1 frog or, a billion frogs, unless those billion frogs can interact in some creative way. Now, if they do, then that's more potential there because of the numbers. But that's not the point we're making here. You're kind of asking the point, why doesn't the system just make it how it wants it rather than having to grow through experience to get there? Just making it how you want it doesn't grow, doesn't change anything. It just takes what you've got and duplicates it. It's not that we are to reach a certain number of frogs, or a certain number of humans with a certain attitude at a certain day and time, and then, all the lights come on and the game's over and check how many points we have. It's not like that. We are here. We are part of a evolving consciousness system. The system itself is evolving, and we're pieces of that evolution. And the way you evolve is by experience creating change.
It has to be experience, always just experience.
Yes, it has to come through experience. Otherwise, it's not real growth. The system cannot lower its entropy by just taking what it already has and duplicating it, or taking the things that aren't working. Let's say taking, a bad actor, taking someone who's not learning and just getting rid of them. Well, they've gotten rid of that part, so that potential's gone, but it hasn't actually created anything new. You see, it hasn't grown anything. So the only way that we progress through evolution is by changing ourselves, by growing up, by becoming something different than what we are. Now that's progress. Just deleting what doesn't seem to be working very well, that'll maybe return unused bits to the system, but let's just assume the system has all the bits it needs, and that it doesn't have to delete programs that aren't working very well in order to get, bits for better programs, that it's got all the bits it needs. So deletion doesn't help any more than duplication as far as growth goes. So the system has to evolve. And, just take our own evolution. So let's say we got to the point where there were mammals. There were little mammals crawling around on the ground. And if you got rid of all the lizards, that really isn't helping the mammals evolve any. You see, it's changing the environment, but getting rid of the lower, less evolved species doesn't help the more evolved species evolve more. The only way to evolve more is to change yourself into something better. That's evolution. So that's why the larger consciousness system doesn't just get rid of everybody who's not doing well and make all the rest of us, be little bundles of love. Well, it wouldn't have done anything doing that. It's already got that. It can do that. That's not the point. The point is to grow up, not to just duplicate itself and say, okay, now it's nothing here but me. All right, I win. Well, that's not what defines winning. What defines winning is growing, changing, evolving. So you've got a real system that needs to evolve. And this real system, we're a part of that system, and we are at whatever level we are. Let's say we have a fair amount of ego and a fair amount of fear. Well, we're a chunk of that system that has ego and fear. And you don't evolve the system by erasing it or magically transmuting it, making it be something else. That doesn't get you anywhere. The only thing that gets you further ahead is having that grow up and change. So you think about an endpoint is the problem. If you think about an endpoint and you say that our purpose here is to reach this endpoint, and however we can reach this endpoint, then that's good. Well, then you're saying, why don't we just define ourselves to be at the endpoint and then we're home? Why all this struggle? Well, it's not the way it works. Evolution is not a matter of getting to an endpoint. Evolution is a matter of changing. Evolution is open-ended. Evolution is never done. There's always more ways, better ways to configure what you've got so that it's more profitable for the system. And at least in physical evolution, the environment's always changing. So there's always more and new challenges to deal with. As far as consciousness goes, we have no idea what its exterior environment might be, or even if there is one. That's outside of our ability to know. But in any case, you don't define your way to an endpoint to be successful. You grow up to be successful.
Yes. In this afterlife reality, do people question their environment? Like, I wake up in a bed in a strange house in a foreign country, or...
Yes, they do.
What's going on?
They do, yeah. When they first get there, they do say, "What's going on? Where am I? What's happening?" And that's when Uncle Harry and Aunt Susie show up and say, "Oh, hi, everything's fine. Yeah, you're in the right place. Everything's okay."
But if that Uncle Harry, for instance, is dead, 10 years dead, don't they feel a little stressed up? They know that Uncle Harry is dead.
Right. And then they realize that they are too. Yeah, they have to realize that they've died. Now, most people, that's not a hard thing. Most people don't just go to sleep and then, die for, totally unexpectedly. I mean, sometimes that happens. Sometimes somebody who appears to be healthy, has a heart attack or a cerebral hemorrhage, while they're sleeping and never wake up. But that's pretty exceptional. Mostly people die, even in accidents and so on. The knowledge that they are about to die or that they are near death is knowledge that they have. So yes, sometimes people are very disoriented and they don't know what happened. And then they have to be treated in their own kind of special way to let them know that, yes, indeed, they have died. They're not in that reality anymore. And here's why, and here's how, and they died, the reason they died, and so on. They may even want to show them a little bit about what's going on there. The body, the rescue squad, the rest of the family. They may even show them a little bit of that just so they kind of can do a little closure and realize that that's what's happened.
I just have to ask something before I lose the question in my mind.
Go ahead.
Sometimes in dreams, I meet my dead, dead relative. But I don't question that. It's a dream and I just interact with my dead relative. But in the afterlife frame, it's different.
Yeah, well, a little bit. Depends on how you get there. If you're dying, if you're sick, you have a terminal illness, or you're in an accident and whatever, and then you meet your Uncle Harry, you put that together right away that, you're dead and Uncle Harry makes you feel better about being wherever it is you are because Uncle Harry was a really nice guy. So that'd be one case. If it's this case where you just go to sleep and then suddenly you find yourself in another reality, you probably think you were dreaming. The first thing would be to convince you that this wasn't a dream and that it wasn't going to end, that you weren't going to wake up from it, that you were here. So that would be one thing you'd have to do to such a person. So some people, have a problem with it. Other people don't. and that reality is there to work with those people that do have a problem with it for whatever the reason.
It seems as if the consciousness in a dream reality is, you accept everything that happens in a dream.
Yes, and that's because you've forgotten about, you no longer are still connected to the physical, or what we call physical, to PMR. You're no longer connected to PMR when you're in the dream. So you don't have a comparison or something to relate it to. You're outside of PMR. You're in another reality frame entirely, and you don't necessarily think in terms of the old reality frame. You're just in a new reality frame. And that happens to some extent as well. People coming into this afterlife reality, they sometimes just interact there. They don't know, but mostly they know that they have died, or they expect the dream to end and it doesn't, and they just don't notice, so they just going on, and it may take them some time before it gets around to the question of, well, would you like to go back and have another life? And they may think, another life? I'm already having one. So yes, but this is just a way station. That subject comes up, and then they decide, and then they go do it, because they kind of accept where they are, and they're no longer attached. The old reality's gone by now, and they just kind of accept it the way it is and go do it.
Yeah. And after a while, this whole past life is just forgotten about.
Yes.
Okay. That was really interesting.
Well, good. If it's interesting to you, I expect it will be interesting to a lot of other people.